Thank you, Michael. He just said 2026, and it was one of those things that I was like, oh, yeah, it is. About halfway through the year, and it's just hitting me. Once again, you're listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Spring Carathon. Behold, I make all things new. Let's get to that trivia question. If you want to answer this question, if you want to donate, if you want to do both, 785-621-4110. Actually, I'm going to let Father Brian go ahead and read this question. So if you would read it twice with the selections, not the answer, please go.
But if I read all the selections, I have to read the answer. Those aren't very good descriptions.
Man, this guy.
All right. The trivia question. Who did John overtake when running to the tomb? A, Peter. B, James. C, Mary Magdalene. Or D, Mary Clopas. Once again, who did John overtake when running to the tomb? A, Peter. B, James. C, Mary Magdalene. Or D, Mary Clopas.
785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. I always laugh at that one. My son and I were actually having a conversation about this the other day. And he's like, why do you think he actually put that in there? Like, well, I'm sure that they had a lot of fun with each other.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Victor gets to tell the history, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Sorry. Father Brian is in here in case you did not notice. And I have no idea what we're talking about, but he does.
Oh, what are we talking
about? I have no idea. I don't have your paper. I don't have your intro. I have nothing. But everybody in our listening area probably knows Father Brian Lager a little bit. So I'll go ahead and let you give your own introduction if you want, and we'll just hop right into whatever you got going on.
Okay. Well, actually, what I'm going to talk about is I took a trip last week to New Mexico. You ever been to New Mexico, Cody?
No. Yes, actually. Yes, I have. Sorry.
And so back in whenever the Consecration of St. Joseph came out that Father Calloway wrote,
Yep.
Read that, I don't know, like 2020, maybe 2021, can't remember. And then my brother and another friend, and a mutual friend of ours, they just were going through it. And in that book, Father Calloway suggests going to St. Joseph shrines, and he suggested even the ones here in the United States that most of us are unaware of or forget about. And so we went to New Mexico specifically to see the Miraculous Staircase at Our Lady of Loreto Chapel in Santa Fe. And while doing so, there's actually a ton of Catholic history down there. And so I'm specifically going to talk about the stairs and the Miraculous Stairs, but also just talk about, in order to understand why the stairs are even there, to talk a little bit about the history of Catholicism in the Southwest, because I learned that the history of Catholicism in the Southwest, the oldest chapel in the United States is in New Mexico, and the oldest image of Our Lady in the United States is in New Mexico.
Well, yeah, I didn't know.
And they're both 400 years old.
Oh, wow.
So, I just think of the history. You know, I think of Ellis County history. I think of history in Western Kansas, and we're like, yeah, the early 1800s, the mid 1800s, and we think of the Revolutionary War, 1776, but we don't think about the fact that Catholicism in the Southwest and even in Florida, I forget when St. Augustine was founded, St. Augustine was founded, but it was in existence almost 100 years before.
Wow.
And so Catholicism had moved up from Mexico into the United States, and just the way that the Spanish were conquering, the Spanish were not just conquering but evangelizing. It moved in the United States way before we were talking about independence from England. So.
Wow. Well, this is going to be a wonderful conversation. You're listening to Father Brian Lager, and we are talking on our Divine Mercy Radio Spring Carathon. Behold, I make all things new. We have that $125,000 goal, and we want you to help partner with us and make it to that goal. What that helps us to do is, one, we have grown a lot over the years, and that's totally from you guys. Two, we are getting ready to move into a new building once again, completely because we are 100% listener funded. We've grown to the point where we've actually outgrown our space, and it is a necessity for us to be able to do this. So thank you so very much for that. It's a really good problem to have. And so we ask that you would continue to support us, continue as we grow in this ministry, and please partner with people like Lorraine Brungart. She called in and pledged $1,000, and with her most generous pledge and with those matching funds that we have, that becomes a $2,000 pledge. So please prayerfully consider supporting us. 785-621-4110. Also, I want to just remind people that we do have that trivia question. I don't see that we have a winner yet. So if we don't have a winner, call in to 785-621-4110. To who did John overtake when running to the tomb? Was it A, Peter, B, James, C, Mary Magdalene, or D, Mary Clopas? 785-621-4110. But without further ado, let's get back with talking with Father Brian Lager and different things that he went to go see in New Mexico. First, I want to ask you your opinion, because I did also read Father Calloway's book when that came out. I found it very good. One of the reasons was I like how he depicted St. Joseph. He prefers a young St. Joseph.
Sure.
Some people prefer an old St. Joseph. What were your thoughts on how he portrays it?
I think his reasoning for young St. Joseph makes sense. And but also we have to remember, for us, old is like 70 or 80.
Yeah.
And they didn't live that long. So I have to think, like, I'm 45 right now, and
we'd be to
old.
the upper cusp.
Yeah. So I like the young for the reasons that he gave, which was the fact that it makes more sense for the aspect of chastity, that it's typically not as much of a challenge for old men, and for younger men, it's more virtuous in that sense. I also like the fact that if St. Joseph was a younger man, he would have had to have led them across Egypt, right? When they ran for their lives after Jesus was born. And so just protecting them in that sense, it just makes more sense. And just for protecting's sake, a younger man makes sense. An older man wouldn't be able to protect them as well as a younger man, and wouldn't have the strength to do so necessarily. So I actually like that depiction of St. Joseph better. There were things in the book that I really, really liked, just things I had never thought about. There are some things that are like, that seems like a stretch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually quite enjoyed it. So
yeah. So then through that book, you decided to go and take a look at some of these places.
Yeah. So like I said, it began with just wanting to go to the Miraculous Stairs, which I've known about the Miraculous Stairs forever. And if anybody doesn't know about the Miraculous Stairs, I'm going to talk about it kind of towards the end. But just a preview, there's a staircase in a convent chapel in Santa Fe, in which the sisters prayed a 9-day novena because they needed these stairs to go to the choir loft. The architect said it's impossible. If we build a staircase up to the choir loft, it's going to take up too much room, and we'll have to eliminate a bunch of seats, and so it can't be done. After the end of the 9-day novena, this guy showed up with a square and a hammer, a worker's square and a hammer, and built this staircase that has no center pole, and the only thing holding it is it's on the ground and what's at the top. Where that's the two connections. That's the only thing that holds it. There were no nails, and it makes two 360-degree turns. And you just think of bending the wood in the way that he did. It would have, and the only thing he had was cups of hot water. Whereas I think when they bend wood now, they have entire rooms where they put the wood in it and they can bend it and hold it, and hold it overnight. And and you just look at this and just like, this is like an impossible feat for a man in that time period. And so there's many to believe that it was St. Joseph, and he walked away and never asked for payment. And the wood that was used was not from the area. And so anyway, I'll talk about that at the end. But just kind of the history of Catholicism in the Southwest first. But in 1539, there's a Franciscan friar, Marcos de Niza. He explored the region looking for the seven cities of Cibola. In the seven cities of Cibola, we can remember Coronado, who was looking for the seven cities of gold. And so they're still looking for the seven cities of gold. In 1598, Juan de Oñate leads the first colonizing expedition. Franciscan friars celebrate a formal mass upon reaching the Rio Grande, an event often called the first New Mexico Thanksgiving. So that's kind of an interesting fact that whenever these explorers came, they brought priests with them. Even Columbus brought priests with them. And the first thing they did when they got off the boat was celebrate Mass. And so that's why we always talk about when we celebrate the American Thanksgiving, we also talk about the first Thanksgiving in America was actually a Mass that was celebrated on American soil.
Yeah.
And so in 1610, the San Miguel Chapel is built in Santa Fe. It is considered the oldest church building in the continental United States. I want to go to a little bit of history about that because we don't think about the oldest history or the oldest chapel in the United States being in New Mexico. But the thing about New Mexico is everything's built of adobe. And so we were joking that you have 3 colors of adobe to choose from, and everything is that color. And so there's a couple of things that are not of that architecture. One is the Loretto Chapel, and the other one is the Basilica that's down there, the Cathedral of the Diocese. So
okay.
They're more of a French Gothic construction, and they're in some sense out of place. But because you and I are of German descent, we think it's more appropriate because of what we're used to seeing and what we think cathedrals and churches should look like. But they're churches that are built out of adobe. I mean, they all have the Spanish look to them. The art has a Spanish look to them. But there's also the interesting mixture of Spanish art with indigenous art or Indian art. And so there's that aspect of that mixture as well. And so, of course, if they're evangelizing, they're going to use the Spanish concepts of Catholicism, but they're going to use the Indian or the indigenous faces and people like that, so they can relate to them, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of cool mixture of art that's down there too. So
that's neat.
And Santa Fe itself, the city itself, is kind of pats itself on the back for being a very artsy city. And so there's art shows and art things going on all over the place down there. I was very surprised about Santa Fe being what it is, and so with having the all this art stuff down there, you've got a crazy mixture of cultures that come to Santa Fe. And so there's all kinds of restaurants, there's all of these art features, and then you've got this huge cathedral in the middle of town, and then you've got this beautiful miraculous staircase and all these missions and all these old 400-year-old churches that are around there as well. So
wow, quick break. We are talking with Father Brian Lager on our spring carathon, Behold, I Make All Things New. I want to thank Joan Dunn, who donated $500. She is a wonderful supporter and does wonderful things in our community. Thank you so much, Joan. And she's also the trivia question winner. So the question was, who did John overtake when running to the tomb? The correct answer there is Peter. So we will get Joan put into that drawing, and also want to thank her again for that donation. With our matching funds, that is a $1,000 donation. The Victorian Knights of Columbus, they have donated $750, so that makes a $1,500 donation with the matching funds. Thank you so very much, Joan. Thank you so very much, Victorian Knights of Columbus. Please join with them and partner with us in spreading the gospel. 785-621-4110. Folks, this is the beautiful thing about being on Catholic radio is we get to simply sit here, talk about the truth, talk about the beauty of our faith and all kinds of other wonderful things. And it gets to go out there to whoever is listening. Please help us out. Call 785-621-4110. Let's get right back to Father Brian Lager, and he's talking to us about his trip to New Mexico and the different sites and things that he saw there. So let's hop right back into it.
Sure. So the San Miguel Chapel was built at the same time as the city of Santa Fe, around 1610. It still sits on the original foundation, which was over a Pueblo Indian dwelling. It's located at the crossroads of the old Santa Fe Trail, the El Camino Real, and the old Spanish Trail. The chapel is dedicated to St. Michael the Archangel and has served as a place of worship for indigenous Mexicans, Franciscan missionaries, Spanish conquistadores, and native Pueblo Indians. Original construction was thought to be rectangular in shape and composed of a dirt floor and mud roof. And so actually when you go into it, they've got glass panels where you can see down the original foundation of the church. So the chapel was most likely constructed by the indigenous people from the province of Tlaxcala, who came to New Mexico as Spanish allies and settlers. They built the chapel for themselves and the Spanish soldiers under the direction of the Franciscans. The chapel is located in the Barrio de Anauco district. San Miguel was targeted by the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. The roof was burned and part of the walls were damaged. Everyone that was hiding in the chapel perished. It was a concerted attack that drove the Spanish as far south as El Paso for a 12-year exile. In 1692 to 1693, Governor General Don Diego de Vargas returned to Santa Fe, resettled the area for the Spanish. The second rebuilding of San Miguel was completed in 1710. In 1798, just remember, this is all still around before the Revolutionary War and even just a little bit after, so very old. In 1798, the mayor of Santa Fe helped fund major repairs and the construction of the beautiful altar screen, which is kind of the big, beautiful art piece that goes behind the altar that you often see in Spanish mission churches. And they usually have a bunch of gold and stuff on it. Like when you see the Spanish mission churches in California, they're beautifully gilded in gold and things like that. This one is not as ornate, but it still has this beautiful art on it. Let's see.
I'll do it really quickly.
Yep,
that's a good place to take a break. I want to thank a couple of people. First, I want to thank a DNL Body Shop who pledged $350. We just had Gianna in here. Her and her husband, Kurt, are the owners of DNL Body Shop. And so we thank them. We thank her for her time. We thank them for being loyal supporters. Their pledge becomes a $700 donation with those matching funds. And I also want to thank Adolf and Deanne Schmidt. They pledged $500, which becomes that $100 pledge. Let's keep those phones ringing. Let's keep those donations coming in. If you're in Father Brian's listening area, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. Please call 785-621-4110 if you would like to partner with us. And I'm getting a question here. Does Father Brian have pictures he wants to share? So I guess that's for you to answer.
I can share some of those for sure.
Okay, where would you share them at so people can see?
I can send them to Michael and he can put them on the Facebook
Okay,
page, so.
Very good. So if you want to see some of the pictures about what Father Brian is talking about, and the nice thing is when we get done with this, you can go back to our YouTube page, and as soon as Michael gets that posted on our YouTube page, you can re-listen to this. Unfortunately, you'll have to hear me again, but you also get to hear Father Brian. And then you can find out as he's talking what those pictures are. And so you can pull those up right there when you're listening to it. 785-621-4110 for your pledges. And we'll get to another question here in just a little bit, but let's go back to Father Brian talking about the history and things that he saw in New Mexico.
In 1848, there was a 3-tiered bell tower that was added to the chapel. And in 1856, the 780-pound San Jose bell was added to the tower. In 1859, the Archbishop, who is Archbishop Lamy, commissioned the Lasallian Christian Brothers to start a school for boys. And remember that name because that's the name that also brought the sisters that built the Nazareth or the Loretto Chapel. And I think it actually was called the Nazareth Chapel. We'll get to that. But a 3-story building was constructed close to San Miguel, which housed the dormitory students from 1859 to 1968. So at that place was the boys' school, and the sisters had the girls' school. So the 3rd floor no longer exists due to a fire, but the Lamy building was granted status on the National Register of Historic District. In 1872, a horrific windstorm destroyed the top 2 tiers of the tower and knocked the bell to the ground, leaving it in several broken pieces. and so that's the old history of the chapel. But back to the timeline and the history of New Mexico. In 1625, the statue, which I was talking about before, the oldest image of Our Lady in America, in the United States, her name is La Conquistadora, and she's still actually in the cathedral in Santa Fe. And so there's a side chapel dedicated to her, and she's in the reredos of the old, which would have been the old cathedral. The cathedral is huge now. It was much smaller at the time. So
Wow.
they actually call her Our Lady of Peace now. So, but the Hispanics like to call her La Conquistadora. So there's kind of I think the reason they wanted to change the name is to be a little politically correct. So,
Yeah.
so as you can imagine. So then in 1688, the Pueblo revolt occurs. Many Franciscan missionaries are killed and the churches are destroyed. Spanish colonists and remaining clergy are expelled to El Paso. So even on American soil, there was Catholics that were killed. And part of it was just the fight between the indigenous and the Spanish colonialists, which there's always a fight. And in our modern day, we like to try and blame the colonialists for, you're driving out the indigenous peoples and you're changing their culture and things like that. And I'm always like, well, let's be clear about what they were changing. You think about the Aztecs when the Spanish showed up in Mexico. What were the Aztecs doing?
Slaughtering people.
They were human sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
So if you're saying that we killed the Aztecian culture because we were ending human sacrifice, I think the reality is we were bringing about the colonials were bringing about a human dignity that didn't exist in Mexico. And the indigenous peoples were not a united people. They all had their own tribes and they fought against each other and they didn't like each other. And so I say we, but the colonialists brought in just this sense of, okay, just war. Just war is a big term right now, but let's talk about a united people. Let's actually have some civility. Let's actually have just some justice towards one another. And so we have to be really careful about how we talk about that. Was there injustices done? Probably, sure. Absolutely. But the huge culture change from going from a culture of human sacrifice to a culture of honoring our Blessed Mother and respecting human dignity, that's pretty big change.
Yeah.
And one that I hope we can all agree that needed to happen. So.
I mean, it's kind of, even if we look at our culture right now, obviously there's a lot of the culture of death out there.
For sure.
And so years down the road, if someone came in like, oh, well, you Catholics, let's just say that we have I don't want to say necessarily Catholic utopia, but let's say that, the United States just becomes very Catholic. And then like, oh, those darn Catholics, they changed the culture. Well, look at what our culture was doing. I mean, we didn't respect life anywhere in our culture. So yeah, kind of the same thing that there are some people that have done some bad things, but when you take things at a whole and you look at them in the proper respect, you can understand, okay, what were they trying to change?
Right.
So thank you very much. We're talking with Father Brian Lager. He's given us some good insight into some of the history of the New Mexican culture, and especially this chapel that he went to go see and these St. Joseph sites. You're listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Spring Carathon with our goal of $125,000. We appreciate your help and your donations. Please call 785-621-4110, 785-621-4110. And we're going to get to another question here in about 5 minutes. But let's get back to Father Brian Lager.
So it's important to remember that the United States still wasn't formed until the late 1700s. New Mexico wasn't a state, wasn't a part of the United States until I think I saw that there had been a state for about 100 years now. And so even Catholic-wise, New Mexico didn't have its own diocese. They were still under the Mexican diocese. And so just remember all this, that it wasn't like we see it today where, Santa Fe has their own bishop and that didn't happen until, I'll get to that, but 1850. So,
wow.
So in 1816, The construction is completed there's a sanctuary down there that a lot of people told us we had to go see, called the Santuario de Chimayo, which is a shrine that's out there with some healing dirt, they say, that's out there. So
Oh, I think I've heard of this because they have, isn't there like a little hole
yes,
where you can take a handful of it
yes,
and then they just keep filling it back up?
that's my guess, because we joked about that when we were there. It's like, I wonder if people keep taking all this dirt, you'd think that hole would be pretty darn deep.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, they clearly fill it back up every day.
Yeah.
But there are reported miracles from there. So
Wow.
who am I to say that there's nothing special there?
Yeah.
So in 1821, Mexico wins independence from Spain. New Mexico becomes part of Mexico. Franciscans are largely replaced by diocesan clergy from the Diocese of Durango. In 1833, Father Antonio Jose Martinez establishes the first seminary in Taos to train local Hispanic clergy. And then in 1850, the Vatican establishes the Vicariate Apostolic of New Mexico. So not even quite a diocese yet, just an apostolic vicariate, which means it's like our diocese is split into vicariates. We used to call them, we used to call them vicariates. We call them deaneries now, but and so it's just split into 4 areas. And so that's how this diocese was. It was split into it, but it's an apostolic ones, which means that a bishop is over it, not just a priest. And it's the forerunning or the foreshadowing that it will be a diocese at some point. So eventually, that's what happens. In 1851, Jean-Baptiste Lémy arrives as the first bishop. He initiates the construction of the French Romanesque Cathedral Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. In 1875, Santa Fe is elevated to an archdiocese, and then and so that's the basic history of New Mexico. So first, let's talk about the statue of La Conquista. Miraculous stairs, but
that's okay. We got time.
These other things are important to talk about for just the understanding of the history there as well. So the statue is a small wooden statue about 30 inches tall of the Madonna and Child, now in the Cathedral Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi in Santa Fe. She's the first Madonna brought to what is now the United States, so the very first. The statuette is carved out of wood and measures approximately 3 feet. Actually, it's 30 inches. A Catholic confraternity called La Confradia de la Conquistadora exists to promote devotion to the Mother of God under this title, and for the upkeep and maintenance of both her chapels, and so on and so forth. So just pretty amazing that this is the statue that began kind of Marian devotion in the United States in a sense, and so it always goes back to that. So anyway.
Wow. Let me jump in really quickly, and we're going to get our second trivia question of the 10 o'clock hour. So if you think you know this, call 785-621-4110. Get your phones ready. In one of the Gospels, Jesus asks to see a coin while in the Jewish temple. Whose face was on the coin? Was it A, Caesar, B, Caiaphas, C, Pontius Pilate, or D, Herod? In one of the Gospels, Jesus asks to see a coin while in the Jewish temple. Whose face was on the coin? A, Caesar, B, Caiaphas, C, Pontius Pilate, D, Herod. Call 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. And as we are on listening with Father Brian Lager, please prayerfully consider donating to this cause. As we do this twice a year, it's wonderful to have all of these people come in and give us of their time so that they can come in and help us to understand things more clearly, give us into some insight into things we know. Father Brian is teaching us some truths about New Mexico, the culture there, and some of the wonderful things that he's seen. And so if you appreciate what we're doing, please continue to donate. Please partner with us, 785-621-4110. Let's get back to Father Brian Lager.
So let's talk about the chapel. So this Loretto chapel today, it was commissioned by the Sisters of Loretto for their girls' school called the Loretto Academy in 1873. So Archbishop Jean-Baptiste Lémy had brought in 2 French architects, Antoine Mouly and his son Projectus to work on the St. Francis Cathedral project and suggested that the sisters could make use of their services on the side to build a much-needed chapel for the academy. So Projectus ended up being the main architect for the project, basing the Gothic revival design, complete with spires, buttresses, and stained glass windows, imported from France via the Santa Fe Trail based on the Saint Chapelle chapel in Paris. So that's a famous chapel in Paris that if you were to see the two next to each other, they'd look almost exactly the same. So the chapel was built from locally quarried sandstone and took 5 years to complete, being officially consecrated in 1878. The Loreto Chapel was used on a daily basis by the students and nuns of Loreto until the school closed in 1968. And then it is now a privately owned museum and wedding venue, while the rest of the academy campus was demolished. Now, the staircase. That's why we're here, right? I'm just going to say, it's probably one of the most amazing things I've seen.
Really?
It really is. Like, you can't.
I would love to see it someday.
You can't actually touch it. I was hoping that everybody would leave the chapel and I'd just be able to cross over the barrier and go look at it a little bit closely.
You're one of those guys. Me too.
Well, and it's just because of what it is, right?
I know.
And so all right. So let's talk about it. Let's actually find the history.
Go ahead while I congratulate Marlene Bonilla. She is our trivia winner. We'll get you put into that drawing for a $50 gift certificate to Messenger Traditional Catholic Books and Gifts. Thank you for calling in, Marlene. The question was, in one of the Gospels, Jesus asked to see a coin while in the Jewish temple. Whose face was on the coin? Correct answer there is Caesar. So thank you very much for calling in. That is the same number you call with your donations. Call 785-621-4110. And if you want to partner with us and help us to continue putting this wonderful content out there on the radio waves, 785-621-4110. We are in the point of our discussion with Father Brian Lager that we are going to be talking about these wonderful steps in Laredo. And he gave a little bit of background on that earlier. So if you missed it, you can go back and listen to this again. But now we're really going to break into it and get some more from Father Brian Lager.
Okay, so the reason the staircase even exists. So the Sisters of Loreto consulted multiple builders in order to find a workable solution in order to build this staircase, in order to get to the choir loft, so they could use the choir loft. And so that's a small chapel. They couldn't build the size of staircase that needed to get up to the chapel unless they removed a ton of pews, and they didn't have room to remove those either. So what did they do? They decided, just like any group of nuns does, they pray, right? So they decided to pray a 9-day novena to St. Joseph, the patron saint of carpenters. On the last day of the novena, a mysterious stranger appeared and offered to build the staircase. He worked alone using only a few simple hand tools and disappeared afterwards without collecting his pay or the sisters learning his identity. And so the story goes, he showed up with a hammer and a carpenter square. That's all he showed up with. And he just said, leave him alone. So I think it took him like a month or two to build it or something like that. The finished staircase was an impressive work of carpentry, seeming to defy physics as it ascends 20 feet without any obvious means of support. The Sisters of Loreto viewed its construction as a miracle and believed that the mysterious builder must have been St. Joseph himself. As the story spread, the staircase became one of Santa Fe's most famous tourist attractions. The staircase was originally built without handrails. You'll see it today with handrails, and you can see pictures when you're down there of it without handrails. I wouldn't have climbed that sucker without handrails either. But the sisters were so afraid of someone falling off, they found another craftsman to build the handrails, which the handrails look like they were always part of it, but they were added about 10 years later. So the staircase lacks the newel, or the central pole, usually used to support and stabilize a spiral staircase. And therefore, the means of supporting the weight is not obvious. However, the staircase is supported by its stringers, just like a conventional straight staircase, although in this case, each stringer is twisted into a helix. So like I said before, it makes two complete turns, 2 complete 360-degree turns. Observers have also noted that the inside stringer was such a tight radius that it is able to function similarly to a straight center support. According to an analysis by a professional carpenter, the assembly of the stringers from overlapping segments joined by wood glue creates a laminate that is actually stronger than the wood alone. The use of wooden pegs rather than nails prevents degradation of the joints due to the compression set as the wood swells against the nails because of changes in humidity or temperature. It's super dry down there, so I don't know that there'd be much change in humidity. But although the staircase as built lacked any external bracing, there's now an iron brackets on it because they thought they needed the iron brackets in order to prevent it from all the vibrations of cars and stuff going by. So that's all there now. I think I heard a story once that those actually caused damage.
Probably
because they screwed them in there and it was built. Apparently, spiral staircases are built to kind of like a spring so that they can adjust with the way that things move. And so when they tried to tie those in, it didn't allow the movement that it needed, and so it actually kind of damaged the staircase a little bit. So
holy smokes!
Yeah, sometimes we should just leave stuff alone.
No kidding.
So anyway, that's what. It's just a super cool staircase. I'm going to pull up a picture and show you real quick. I sent the pictures to Michael so he can put them up there.
Okay.
But I think for me, just seeing it. So because they prayed this novena to St. Joseph, and because of the fact that he just showed up and left without any pay, they believe it was St. Joseph. Many people believe that it was St. Joseph that built it. So I'm showing it to Cody right now.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome. You could even hold it up right there if you.
I don't know if people can see that very good, but you can go on Facebook and see the pictures later. But when I looked at it, I think in today's world it'd be possible to build something like this just because we have modern technology. He did not. And so all of that wood that had to be turned and then connected, because it wouldn't have been one piece. It had to be connected and then bent and used with hot water, they said, cups of hot water, and held there for a long time so it would get to the exact turn that it needed to be. Just was an absolutely incredible feat. And then there's just this beautiful designs that he carved into the side of the steps.
Oh, wow.
And you look at the steps themselves and they're just absolutely stunning. And if I remember correctly, the wood itself is not from any tree that you'd find in New Mexico.
That's what I've
heard. Like a sycamore tree or something like that. And so it's just not from there. But the one thing is there's a bottom that kind of covers the steps. And as I was preparing to talk about this, I found out that was actually added later. That's not original. And can't remember why they did that, but you can just see. So the only thing that's attaching it is that's holding it, and up here, that's the only thing that was holding it up, was just at the bottom, the stair at the bottom, and the stair at the top, and then the whole weight is perfectly aligned so that it just holds itself up.
Like that. Especially in that time. That's right. That's miraculous in and of itself.
So it was built in the 1870 and or 1860, and then and it was used for 100 years until the school closed.
Wow.
And so there's pictures of they have like an entire choir standing on the steps with a nun at the top and a nun at the bottom or something like that. And so it held all this weight that they put on there. And it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So
cool. Really quickly breaking in to thank Joyce Toll, who donated $100, and she challenges her parish, St. Bridget of Sweden, to call in and donate. So thank you, Joyce. And I also love that. I love the challenges that come in. If you know Joyce, please match her donation. We have wonderful donors. There we go. We have wonderful donors who donated these matching funds for us at the beginning of our carathon. And those funds go to people like you who call in and donate, people like Joyce. So when she donated $100, her gift automatically becomes $200 with those matching funds. So thank you, Joyce, for that donation. Please join with Joyce. Call into 785-621-4110 to donate and help us to stay to grow as you have already. Our Carathon theme is Behold, I make all things new. Our goal is $125,000 by the end of Friday. Let's see if we can use up as many of those matching funds as we can today. 785-621-4110. Let's hop right back into things with Father Brian Lager.
So it just kind of remembering kind of the history that we were given, just the humility in which this guy showed up with his donkey and a toolbox, it said, and his toolbox had a hammer and a, as I've said before, a hammer and a carpenter's square. And the sisters even ran ads to try and find the man, and he never showed back up for payment or nothing. So that's why they've always attributed it to miraculously to
St. Joseph.
To St. Joseph. So, and I don't really have much else to say about it except for the fact that I think it's stinking cool, and I think and I think so. You know, I go on pilgrimages a lot, and we went to Poland this last summer, and I'll be going to Rome actually. And going to Rome this year, and I always forget about the things in the United States. Like I just don't think of the United States being that old. I don't think of the United States being 400 years old.
Yeah.
And so I think there's ways for us to do little pilgrimages throughout the United States. And one of our priests in seminary always said, somebody asked and said, where would you go on vacation? Like if you could. And he said, well, I'd stay here in the United States. There's so many things in the United States to see between all the national parks that we have, all the beauty that we have in the United States, and even all just the beautiful pilgrimage sites and all the beautiful churches and all the just ways in which we've shown devotion in our own way, in our own culture here in America. So we don't have to go on pilgrimage, and we don't have to plan a exotic pilgrimage to Lourdes or to Rome or anything like that. We can do that here in the United States. Is it super cool to go to Lourdes and Rome? Absolutely,
sure.
Because we see the there's just the devotions as they spread out, and just you go to Rome and you see St. Peter's, biggest church in the world, that was built in the 1200s and still standing. And of course, it's probably a maintenance nightmare. But that's a pastor speaking right there. Can't imagine who's changing that light bulb. But I hope they have their insurance up to date. But there's incredible things to see in all the places I've been. They are absolutely incredible. But there's also things like if we're on a budget and we can't spend a ton of money, there's places to go even in Kansas. Like I think of the beautiful churches we have. Go to Ellis County. There's several churches around here. You could do a day pilgrimage or a 2-day pilgrimage. You go to, like with Father Emil Capon in the state. You go to Wichita and go pray at his tomb. You go out to Pilsen, see the church. Go through the museum when you're out there, which is the rectory next door. That's a little pilgrimage you could do. You could go to the Blessed Stanley Rother Shrine in Oklahoma City. That's only, I think from here, it's about a 6-hour drive. So, I mean, there's
most, I think.
Yeah. So you go to St. Louis and go to the Basilica downtown. Have you ever been to the Basilica in St. Louis?
No, but I've heard it's amazing.
It is absolutely stunning. And the fact that it's
is that the one with all the little mosaics?
Yes.
Okay.
The biggest mosaic, I believe, in the United States, if not the world, but it's definitely the United States. The whole entire ceiling is mosaics.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely incredible. You could go there, and that's only like 7-hour drive. So there's things that can be done. And if anyone's planning on going to the beatification of Fulton Sheen in September, that's on the way. So
wow.
That you could put that into your stops to go and see the Basilica, which I'm sure people will. But
absolutely. Well, in our last 10 to 15 minutes here, can you give us some insight? Sometimes people do this, and I mean, for one, if you're taking a family trip, well, then obviously it's more of a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
If you're wanting to do a pilgrimage, that is one of those things where there's a little bit of a difference there.
Sure.
Between specifically a pilgrimage and a vacation, a lot of this things may cross over.
Absolutely.
But would you give us some insight into that? If you're wanting a vacation, sure, take your family, go to St. Louis, go see that. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful stop. But what are those differences? How should we see them different? And then, you've already given us some insights. Would you also maybe share with us what are some of the things that you've seen that you really enjoyed also?
Sure. So I think it's good to remember that going on pilgrimage, actually, there's indulgences associated with it. And I believe possibly a plenary indulgence. We'd have to look at the book and see. And so what would make something a pilgrimage? Well, a pilgrimage is a spiritual, you call it a spiritual vacation in a sense, or a pilgrimage journey, or a spiritual journey. And so you have a beginning and an end. And from that beginning and the end, you incorporate prayers throughout. And the end might be, okay, we're going on pilgrimage. Let's just use St. Louis. So we're going to the Cathedral Basilica in St. Louis. That's our end goal. And we're going to pray on our drive there. We might do fun things along the way. There's nothing wrong with doing fun things along the way, but we want to also make it spiritual. We don't want to make it so that we're just traveling and fighting with each other in the back seat. I'm sure your kids don't do that at all.
No, they read.
And so you have your beginning from where you're starting, your end where you're going, praying throughout. Spend a significant amount of time at the place that you're going to see. And in that place, you could spend a couple hours just looking at the ceiling. I mean, it's amazing. But then making sure that you're actually praying when you're there too. And then all of the other things that go along with gaining an indulgence, right? Receiving communion. So try and find mass along the way. And even if you can get there at a time where you can go to mass at the site itself, praying for the Holy Father's intentions, going to confession. Once again, maybe you can go to confession while you're at the site. And sometimes you can actually even schedule that. You can even call and say, hey, we're going to be passing through. We want to make a pilgrimage to this place. I noticed that when we're going to be there, there's not confession times. Is there any way that we get a priest available to hear confessions? Sometimes they're available, sometimes they aren't. And so, but with an indulgence, it doesn't have to be on the day of. We've got time before and after that we can do that. And so then, if we're taking our whole family, then do some fun things while you're in St. Louis. There's lots of fun things to do. So it doesn't just have to be just spiritual things the whole way. It can be fun things along the way and after we've completed the event as well. And then on the way home, making sure that we're not just, once again, not just doing nothing, but making sure we're praying along the way back too, because it's all about there and back. And the whole point of pilgrimage itself is to remind ourselves that our entire life is a pilgrimage. From the moment that we are born, or from the moment we're conceived until the moment that we die, we are on a pilgrimage in this life from birth to death. And then once we die, birth into eternal life, and then we don't die again, right? So that's our actual only homeland where we've actually attained where we are meant to be is heaven. And so everything else in this life is a starting point and an ending point, and it keeps just repeating itself all throughout our life, because that's a sign of what God is doing in our life, that there's a beginning, there's an end, but then eventually there's a beginning and there's no more end. It's just a beginning. And heaven is always just a beginning, perpetually. And maybe we might find that boring, but that's because we're only thinking in worldly terms. But when you think of heavenly terms, that's not boring. That's like what we're created for. We're created for newness. Jesus says, I make all things new. Isn't that what our theme is? And so what is new? Well, our life is new. Our life is new in Christ, and it's always a beginning, and it's forever. So
we literally won't have time to be bored.
No, literally.
Yeah.
Because there won't be time.
Yeah. We're talking with Father Brian Lager. We've been talking wonderful things about pilgrimages and how to go on them, the ones that he's gone on. You're listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Spring Carathon. Behold, I make all things new. Remember, we do have that goal of $125,000. We had a lot of wonderful people donate already this morning, but we want to remind you that we still still have a few minutes before the afternoon to donate. And even if we are on lunch break, you can still call 785-621-4110, or you can go to dvmercy.com and you can donate there. Either way helps us to be able to continue doing what we do. And we are on here this week asking for your help and being able to really just put out quality programming so that everybody out there can hear the truth of Christ, can hear the truths of the church. And what a better way to, there really isn't a better way to evangelize our world than being able to put it out there on our media. So please help us to continue doing that. 785-621-4110. All right, Father Brian, about 7 minutes left here. Are there any things that you would want to share with us on pilgrimages that you've gone to? What are something, whether it is something that you took away later after you came back, things that happened within the pilgrimages, or things that you actually witnessed? Could you give us some thoughts into those?
Probably the thing that I always do when I get back is there's always lots of regret. Regret that I didn't prepare for where I was going. And didn't fully understand what I was seeing. And
so do your homework first.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Do your homework first. So like when we went to Poland this last summer, like I've read John Paul II's biography, and you hear a lot about Poland because of him, right? And if you're devoted to the Divine Mercy, you might know some things about Poland because of that. But you don't know the fullness of it. You don't know. You have to understand Poland's history to understand everything, and understand the importance of all these things that you're going to see, and understanding why Wadowice is the way it is, and why Krakow is the way it is, and just understanding, trying to understand World War II, because that's where a lot of that stuff came out of. They had a history way before that. That's the modern history that we kind of all kind of associate with Poland, and trying to get a better grasp of all that before I go. And that, when I got back from Poland, I had that regret. When we got back from the Holy Land. I think there's an aspect of that where I'll never fully understand.
Sure.
But there's always the aspect of, I wish I would have taken more time to understand what I was seeing. And so now I follow several people that do Holy Land pilgrimages for a living, and just listening to them talk on social media, just like, oh, that's why that was so important. That's why we saw that. And trying to understand, just especially the Holy Land, where Jesus was, how the temple actually was in the time of Jesus versus how it is today, and even before Herod built the second temple, just understanding what the temple looked like, even Solomon's temple versus Herod's temple. So that's, I think, still to this day, probably the most impactful pilgrimage was probably the Holy Land, and still just hearing the stories and being able to picture in my mind where that actually took place, because we actually were standing there, and trying to revisit just in my mind where those things were and how those things were. A lot of those things have been destroyed just over time, but you can get a general glimpse, and you can touch the walls and things like that. Even some of the excavations they're doing of the temple, Solomon's temple, like, you're touching several thousand-year-old walls.
I didn't know that they're actually being able to find some of
for sure,
the original temple.
Some of the walls that are the retaining walls around. As they dig. So right now, where the Wailing Wall is, there's a pathway that goes, as you're looking at the Wailing Wall, there's a pathway into the left. We did not go in there because we just kind of thought we weren't allowed, because we saw the the Jews coming and going, and so we're like, well, maybe that's just a door for them. But actually, if you go in there, they've got more of the wall, and you can get right behind where the back wall of the temple would have been, and the west wall of the temple, closest to the Ark of the Covenant.
Holy cow.
And so they've actually dug all that out and dug down, and so a lot of that they're still digging out. So
wow. So even knowing that would have been a game changer.
Absolutely. So knowledge is probably the biggest thing. It's just preparation before you go. And then just making sure you're doing your best to take everything in. trying to pray at all the places. That's what I'm really bad about that. I just get focused on seeing
Oh yeah.
what I'm supposed to be seeing and not actually praying with what I'm seeing. So I've been to Rome more times, and so maybe my trip to Rome will be different this year.
Okay. You going again this year?
Yeah, so we're going at the end of October, beginning of November, and it's mostly actually every single person on the trip I actually personally know from one thing or another, except maybe one or two. But it's about half the people are from Colby, which is really exciting, and so it's just all people that like I've a relationship with of some sort. Whereas a lot of the other pilgrimages have been, me and my friend Father Scott have done them, and so there have been a lot of people from his parish, and the majority of them have been from his parish. Well, this one, he's coming with me, but it's majority of
nice
are from my parish, and so it's just gonna have a different feel to it this time. So
yeah. Well, Father, thank you so very much. Is there anything that you want to leave us with? And when you do, would you also please leave us with your priestly blessing?
You bet. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Father, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you being here.
You're welcome.
We've been talking with Father Brian Lager on his trip to New Mexico, on pilgrimages and all kinds of wonderful things. So thank you for being here with us and listening to that. Once again, I want to remind people that we're live on Facebook, Rumble, and YouTube. Some of you might be watching right now on Facebook, where we are running that live, or on one of the other ones. And if you like what you're listening to, if you like what you're seeing, please call into 785-621-4110. Just like an anonymous donor we had who gave $1,000, that becomes a $2,000 pledge with those matching funds. Once again, with those matching funds, if you call in, your donation is doubled immediately. We had over $20,000 to start the day. We're probably somewhere down around 18,000 or something like that. We'll try to get you a number after the break, but please do prayerfully consider joining with us. Call 785-621-4110. Just like Joyce did, just like this anonymous donor did. And we want you to partner with us in keeping these radio waves going. You are listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Spring Carathon. Behold, I make all things new. We have that carathon goal of $125,000. Please go to dvmercy.com. Call 785-621-4110, and you can donate at either of those places. You're listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Spring Carathon. Behold, I make all things new on 101.7 KJDM Lindsborg and Salina, 105.7 KMDG Hayes, 88.1 KM or KRTT Great Bend, 88.1 KVDM Hayes, 89.1 KGOH Colby, and 107.3 K297 AI Hill City. We will see you after the break.